Hey, everybody. Welcome to the B2B Revenue Leadership Podcast. Hey, what we do on this podcast is talk about what B2B sales and marketing leaders, operators, and experts are doing today to really break through and grow their businesses at exponential levels. Let's get it in the interview. At the end, I'll give you an update on my courses, and you can check out my website at b2brevenue.com, and it's Brian G. Burns on LinkedIn. Hey, Kyle, welcome to the show. As a way of getting started, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Brian. So a little bit about me and what I would say in the order of significance to me is I'm a husband, I'm a father, a veteran of the United States Navy who was an aspiring wealth management advisor, but then jumped into the world of B2B sales on a whim. Absolutely fell in love with it. And that's kind of where I found myself now. What I find, I guess, to be really interesting or thematic on that last point, right, of people who get into the sales profession is you don't really grow up saying to your mom and dad when you're a young, boy or girl, I want to be a sales professional. Instead, you fall into it.
Yeah.
But the great thing about it is what had me passionate about pursuing my CFP and a career in wealth management was helping people plan and prepare for their future, which is exactly what I'm doing today, just through the lens of sales leadership.
And why the Navy?
Man, that's a great question. So it sounds really cheesy when I say it and I reflect back on this. I have a bunch of Marines in my family and a bunch of Air Force, no Navy, no Army. The reason I joined the Navy was a little bit of just this rebellious kind of blood I had flowing through me, but also Top Gun is one of my all-time favorite movies. And so that opening scene, you can't help but watch it and say, damn, that's something I really like to go do.
And did you get to do that?
No, I spent 4 years in the desert. So not exactly what I thought, but it was still an amazing 4 years. Got to grow up, got to see the world, figure out what I wanted to do. It's a great opportunity for any young man or woman to go out there and really explore the world and grow as a human.
Yeah, because I think it gives you that structure, teamwork, the ability to work with others and build some great habits for the rest of your life.
Absolutely.
As opposed to just partying.
Yeah, very, very little of that. Not much partying going on in the Middle East or when you're in the military anyways.
And so how did you get into sales? What was the flipping or the tipping point there?
Yeah, so going back to passionate about helping plan and prepare for their future, I was always perplexed on when you're in school, whether it's grade school, high school, or college, right, Brian? There's certain classes you're required to take. Art, music, foreign language, and not to say that these things aren't important, but how is it we don't have a mandatory class on finance and how that works, right? What is compounding interest? How does it work for you or against you? What is a credit card versus a debit card? These things, I think it's absolutely just a huge miss that we don't teach it. And so that was my mission, right? I want to go do this for a living. And I have the Series 7, Series 66, and I vividly remember late one night of studying for the CFP, just thinking, wow, all I've ever done is school and the military. And then I spent 3-4 years in this financial management field. I don't have any context. I don't know if this is actually what I really want to do. And this what if creeped into my head. Like, what if there's a bigger calling out there for me? And I would rather try and fail and then never have that what if on my shoulder than not try and always question it. And so literally on a whim, I had a colleague who was doing B2B sales, or a friend, I should say. He said, why don't you give it a whirl? And I jumped in and it blew me away. And I hope to be doing this for the rest of my career. Glad I made the move.
And what you like about it?
I in particular, the reoccurring revenue or the SaaS sales model. I like the fact that really two things. One, there is no bait and switch, right? You need to be setting proper expectations in the sales process. Otherwise, you're wasting your time and you will never get the return on the investment or the CAC that you invested. So that's the big one. The other one is maximizing LTV is the name of the game, and net revenue retention. And if you were working for an organization that truly puts the customer first, right? I mean, everyone says that. No, and I don't think anyone's maliciously saying it and doing otherwise. However, if you don't have the process, the people, and the incentives in place, then a less number of the companies promising to put the customer first actually do. And so in this subscription model, or and especially in the technology sector, you are required to continue to deliver value. And when you do it, you'll have the net revenue retention over 100%. You'll have your loyal customers. It gets the flywheel going. Yeah. You have more organic referrals instead of just paid. And I think that's where the best companies rise to the top. And to me, that's the real driver.
And I think that's been a huge change in everyone's business model, because, you know, I grew up in the selling the enterprise. What we were trying to do is steal from the future constantly, right?
Yeah.
Trying to, okay, you're going to pay us a couple $1 million over 5 years. How about 1 million right now?
Yeah. And the other thing I would say, yeah, 100%. And the other thing is, so I'm not on the enterprise side, I'm on the small business side. And what's great about that, right, is, well, every business is, I think, an amazing just thing. I love that whole aspect of capitalism. Small businesses are truly, in my opinion, the backbone of the economy. And the solution that you can offer, if it's truly valuable to them, you will help them thrive. And that's the goal, right? You want to land them and earn their trust and add value, and hopefully empower them to grow and thrive. And through that, that partnership gets a lot more powerful over time.
And why'd you make the switch into leadership?
Really, it just goes back to, so I think we all know, right? Leadership may be a whole lot more responsibility, not necessarily more pay. So you're likely not doing it for the income. The reason I do it is because I truly am fulfilled watching someone accomplish their goals. And success is different for everybody. That, I think most people would agree. Sometimes it's income. Sometimes it's title. Sometimes it's having the support to try a new endeavor. It could be health, family, many different things. So when you are trusted to empower or lead a team, it is your responsibility to understand what success looks like for everybody and then help them get there. And because everybody's different, it keeps my job really exciting, right? It's not monotonous. It's not the same thing every day. It's constantly changing as your team and their personalities and their desires change. And I found that to just be the most rewarding part.
And what's your team makeup today? What are the titles, numbers, maturity?
Yeah, so an account executive, 3 different teams, about 41 individuals that I have the privilege of leading. And we're all focused in the small business side, right? So it's 3 different teams, just different go-to-market motions for that segment.
And what's your biggest challenge?
Wow, that's a great question.
Prioritization.
I would say, well, so I'll keep it relevant to the times, right? So we're talking in the middle of the COVID pandemic. I think the biggest challenge is always keeping people focused on their controllables. It's a incredibly natural human just tendency to think about everything that's going against you and maybe start to erode to the point of, well, that's just going to prevent me from being successful. And while I will not dispute that this absolutely throws a wrinkle in everybody's plan, right? If you had just put together your fiscal plan for the year and then this happened, like, you can throw it out the window. You have to reevaluate, reconsider. Yep. But how do you then encourage and empower and lead your team through this in a way that they know they can come out of this stronger, right? And so I Brian, often use this formula I call the success formula, and that is that success is equal to skill times will. And I think defining those 2 variables is really important when you're explaining this to your team. And I'm using success in the context of being a great sales professional or being a great team, right? Delivering good results. So skill is, are you getting better each and every day? You might have more capacity now than you did a few months ago. So what are you doing with it, right? Are you reading that extra book? Are you listening to more podcasts? Are you writing down the most common objections and then taking your sales methodology, whether it's Challenger or Sandler, and applying talk tracks and then practicing it? And then pulling up a tool like Gong and reviewing it with your peers and your managers. Like, are you actually practicing and getting 1% better every day? And then there's the skill piece, or the will piece, I'm sorry. The will is the grit, the grind, the hustle. And it's not to say that, I know I've watched your stuff all the time, right? It's not just about doing 500 calls in a week. But you do have to get the reps, right? You have to work for it more than you wish for it. And so they're not contradictory in my opinion of, hey, you want me to just go out there and practice the fundamentals and techniques, or do you want me to make more calls? I don't think they're contradictory.
Not at all.
I think they're complementary, right?
Yeah.
Which is go get really, really talented, understand the fundamentals, the tactics, the techniques, but then go practice. So
Right.
I have that conversation, skill times will, think about what you're doing about it every day, and then you will be more successful. I guarantee it.
And how about culture? What type of culture do you like to build?
A culture, I would say, has to have four things. And this is not unique to me, so I want to share the credit here, right? But 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, really, really impactful book for me. Radical Candor, and then also, I would say, Conscious Business by Fred Kaufman. So to me, culture, right, has to have a foundation of trust and integrity. Absolutely. And the way you build that, one, you have to have the right players. And maybe we don't have time to go into the recruiting aspect of this, but assuming you have the right players on the field, you have to be open, vulnerable, and transparent as a leader. And if you do that, you will create that trust and the integrity. The next thing is authentic communication. So make sure that when you're having conversations and you're soliciting feedback, you genuinely want to hear the feedback. You're not just going through the motions. People see right through that. So authentic communication, challenge directly, right? Care deeply, and it's okay to disagree, just commit afterwards. That third layer then is what I'll consider, or what I'll call impeccable communication or impeccable commitments. And that is, you know exactly what good looks like. You know who's doing what, why they're doing it, and when they're doing it by. And that'll create the accountability. And that's really where you get that pattern of a high performing culture.
I mean, other than being a great role model and serving as a sample or an example, how do you communicate that to the team?
It comes from, well, one, you do want to set that expectation when anyone's joining the team. You would set that expectation in any of your like all hands, or maybe it's a quarterly or a monthly stand up. But the way you can really deliver it is in the one-on-one feedback, in the casual conversations. When you see someone who may not be embodying those values we just talked about, then on the spot, give them the candid feedback, right? Here's the situation, specifically what happened. Here's the behavior that you specifically displayed. Here's the impact it had. And here's what I would recommend we do in the future. And when you're constantly, just with little things and with broader messages, reiterating that, and this is what we're striving for, I think that's in time where you get the full buy-in.
And is the rest of the company bought into this, or is this unique to you and your team?
It's 100% a company-wide mentality, right?
Yeah.
And because in sales, as you know, Brian, this is a team sport. Our team can go and have a great sales process, but before it even gets to us, we have to have an amazing marketing team bringing us these leads. Once we close that customer, then we need to have an amazing onboarding team that goes and provides a great experience. Our product, right, EPD needs to have a reliable product. And then our service teams need to make sure they're constantly adding value and delivering on the promise of a great experience. So a huge team effort here for us to be successful. And we are all very much aligned in that's what a good culture should look like.
And how did you come to these elements? Was it just reading books? Was it the military experience? Was it previous jobs?
A little bit of everything, right? I've had the privilege of working with some amazing leaders. So some of this is pulling from them. Some of this is from the books like 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And then a lot of it is trial and error on my part. When I first started leading, it was in the Navy. And like most leaders, I made a lot of mistakes. And I think that's normal, is to be expected. But the difference is, what do you learn from that? And so learning from mistakes, unfortunately, and getting better a little bit at a time, combined with the great mentors and leaders that I've worked with and all the great literature that's out there, that's where we've come to this conclusion of like, what do we want our culture to be? What do we want it to represent?
And with the team, what's the big challenge? Is it recruiting? Is it getting them to understand how to sell, how to communicate?
I would say, so we have a younger Salesforce, definitely a younger team, right? So we don't have 30-year professionals on our team at the moment. So they are hungry and passionate about learning, which is the best part, right? You have to have a team that wants to be coached. If they don't want to be coached, then good luck creating a culture of coaching. But they're deeply, deeply passionate about growing and becoming the best sales professional they can be. And so the challenge is, how do we provide the right tools and coaching to get them there, but not overdo it. We don't want to just throw the book at somebody and hope they absorb it all. You have to do it in a very structured, methodical way. And I think the challenge for me and the rest of my leadership team is determining what that balance is.
And how often do you find where it's just not a match?
Say more about that, Brian.
Well, certainly a lot of people are not coachable. I think I've met a few.
Yeah, I have as well. And I will say, and I'm not blowing smoke here. I don't have anyone on my team who falls into that bucket.
Really?
We have a very, very great onboarding, invite, and recruiting team. We have a very scientific process on how we bring people to our sales team. So that's something that we screen for, right? Yeah. Is what's your propensity for coaching? Like, how open to that are you? And give me examples of this, right? You got to go to those second and third level discovery questions in the interview, because I've realized if they don't have that passion or desire, then I'm just going to be beating my head against the wall in 6 months.
Right. Because that is the number one thing in learning. You either learn from your mistakes, you learn from other people's mistakes, or you don't learn.
Right. Or you run into the situation, Brian, where someone is maybe not achieving the goals that they've set out. It could be the quota you put in front of them. A lot of people have ambitions and goals higher than that. And they come to you as a leader and say, I don't know why I'm not getting there. Can you help me? And then, as hopefully most leaders, right, you're then dedicating incrementally more time to help that person get there. But if that person over time isn't doing what you're asking them to do or what they're saying that they want to do, they're just not showing the commitment or buy-in, then you have a real problem, right? You can't want it more than they do. And so that, to me, can be a little bit frustrating. And that's where the whole coaching conversation comes in of, I'm going to give you the tools, right? I can teach you the skill. What I can't do is give you the will. That comes from you.
Yeah, right. You can't coach to that. And I see the other problem is that the blame and the reasoning and the excuses are everything outside of them. Instead of, what do you have the most control over? You. Right.
Exactly.
You don't have control over the weather.
Yeah.
Or the economy.
Right. And I would say also, Brian, sorry to cut you off here. The thing is like how it's just so freeing, right? It's empowering to know that you can't control what happens around you, but you can control how you react, and you can control what you learn from that. So as soon as you can really adopt that mentality, it is so much more empowering. And to not have it, it's just, it's that passenger mindset. And I just refuse to fall into that category.
And have you seen certain things on the resume or in their past, either employment history or education, that show this capability to be coachable and to elicit feedback, not only be able to take it, but ask for it?
Yeah, exactly. I would say that's hard to do on the resume, right? Now, so I would say in the interview process, what I'm looking for from a coachability standpoint is asking questions about when somebody fails. Like, tell me about your biggest professional letdown or failure. And I'm looking for a couple of things with that. One is, when they answer it, is it somebody else's fault, right? Like, that's the first thing I'm looking for. Is it someone else's fault, or what was your part in that?
Right.
And then secondly, okay, what did you do afterwards? Did you just make a mistake and fail and then not change anything about your habits or your process? Or did you go ask for that coaching? Did you go research what could have led to that, right? So I would say asking about their biggest professional failure is one way to identify both ownership mentality and willingness to get coached. Yeah. And on the opposite end, what's your biggest professional success, right? You want to hear that teamwork mentality. This is what happened. By the way, here are the people that helped it all become possible. And now you've got someone who's team before self, which is also a very critical element of any successful sales org.
And do you have the standard SDR AE model, or is it the whole process?
Yeah, so for my teams, they are full cycle AEs, right? So we do get some leads internally from it's more of a cross-sell type motion. But a lot of this is us prospecting on our end. And so they need to be proficient at going into their book of business, at having a good cold call and sending out a great sequence via emails, adding value, it's very much a full cycle sales experience.
And what skill do you see lacking the most today?
Well, I'll speak specifically to the segment we work in, right? So we have thousands and thousands, over 100,000 small businesses that we're serving. And so if you're an AE and you have several thousand accounts in your name, I think the biggest initial challenge is how do you go through that in a systematic and effective way, right? You can't just send a bulk email sequence to your entire book of business.
That's just do it alphabetically.
Exactly. Yeah, that makes exactly. So that would be the biggest one, right? How do you, as a leader, strike the balance between being really prescriptive? Here is exactly what you should be doing, who you should be going after, and why. Like knowing who your prospect is, your ideal customer profile, and more or less telling them this is what you need to go do every single day, with creativity and allowing a little bit of autonomy. I do think there's a balance, right? I'm not suggesting that you have a high performing rep who has it perfectly figured out, and meanwhile the rest of your team is struggling, and you say, you know what, you guys keep being creative, doing your thing, meanwhile this person's got it dialed in. I'm also not, though, suggesting that we just have you exactly imitate everything that they're doing, because part of what makes you a successful salesperson is your personality, your ability to build rapport and be human, and you cannot totally copy and paste that over to somebody else. So there are some best practices you should be implementing, but don't get so prescriptive to where you take the human aspect out of selling.
And that's it. When people look at such a huge territory, 1,000, and out of that 1,000, how many deals would they have to close to make their number?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, 10. 20,
oh, okay. I thought
30.
you were going through. So in order to hit their number, they would need to be closing about 30 deals a month in the quarter, right? So we do quarterly targets. About 30 deals a month is what we would be shooting for.
So 3%.
So
what is the most likely to be that 3%? What would they typically look like? I'm asking rhetorically, because I bet most reps start at the top of the list and work their way down.
Yeah. It's very much who's the biggest, right? Who's going to provide the largest ACV? And that's where I want to start.
Right. But there's also things like, do you have to replace an incumbent? Are they in the right industry? Is it too small? Is it too big?
100%.
Right. Are they active on social? Are they responsive?
Yeah.
Instead of just looking at everybody as equal. I think that's something that we gotten away with when we put everything into a CRM, because it all looks the same.
Yep.
You know, I think that detective work is something that you have to develop. And that's hard. That requires thinking, and people forget that thinking is an activity.
Yeah. Well, it's hard, and it's also it's a team effort, right? So we have a data science team, and so they can go through and they're looking at all the numbers, but they rely on the feedback of the sales team to say, here's what I'm identifying, or some common themes, whether it's industries, buying personas, geographic location, as all the things you just mentioned. Can you run? That's my hypothesis. Can you go run now the study to see if I'm right there? And then you build this customer scoring methodology, and you can continue to reiterate over time. And then you really are prioritizing based on propensity to buy, not on just hypotheticals, but based on experience on the phone and backed by data from your science team.
And what would you say is your strongest suit as a leader?
It's always hard to answer a question like that, right? I would hope that if you were to ask my team that, they would say it's integrity. I would hope that the answer would be integrity. Always doing what's right when nobody's looking, right? Knowing that your team truly, deep down to their core, believes you have their best interest in mind. There are no ulterior motives. It is all about them. That is why I'm here. If they are not successful, then I have failed in my job. And every decision I make, that's the one question I ask myself, right? Is this the right thing to do? And am I being consistent in how I decide that?
You're not playing business. That's
No,
what I used to call it. Right? No. Playing office.
No, never, ever, aside from the fact that it just doesn't even feel right. It feels slimy, right? It never works. The only way to really, really build a great team and great culture is to make sure that you have everyone else's best interest in mind, and they'll appreciate that. And ideally, you have people who surpass you, right? If you've done a great job as a leader, you could leave tomorrow. Nobody would even know you were gone. They'd fill your shoes in a heartbeat. And while that's a little bit at first, it's like, oh man, that's kind of depressing. It actually means you've done a fantastic job. And that's the sign of a great leader.
Right, because it builds trust, and trust is the bandwidth of truth. And if you're not dealing with truth, you're playing business. You're kind of trying to interpret what's really going on here. It's like analyzing a forecast. You want 300% pipeline, you can get it pretty quick. You just have to enter it.
Right.
But right. You want truth, because you're bubbling it up, and you need to represent accuracy. Well, what do you see most sales leaders today do wrong?
I would say they're focused. I don't want to paint with too broad of a brush. I would maybe take a guess that they are focused on the results first and foremost, right? And to me, it's not necessarily about the results that you should be focusing on. It's the root cause. So if whatever your results that are your KPIs that you're going after, what is actually getting you there, and start there. I truly believe, right, there's this whole new wave of talent that's joining this profession, and they are passionate about working for a company they believe in the mission for, and they want to be coached, and they want to be developed. Sometimes they just don't even know where to start.
Right.
And so we apply the situational leadership methodology, right? Where it's S1, very prescriptive, all the way to S4, where you're just removing that roadblocks. So understand what level of detail and prescription you need to apply to each person to get to those results. Don't just say, why didn't you get to 300% pipeline coverage, right? Because then they're just going to go put in a bunch of fake opportunities. If they're struggling to get those opportunities, then go back and figure out why. Is it the activity? Is it the fact that their conversations maybe are a little bit, ineffective, and coach to that, and let them feel open and vulnerable to asking for that help, and not like they're going to be ridiculed or hung out to dry.
That's it. I think a lot of them aren't asking for that help. They're sitting there paralyzed, frozen, instead of saying, this is what I'm doing, or asking, what should I do? Well, right. You got to do a little bit more thinking than just pushing it onto somebody else. Because if you tell them what to do and it doesn't work, whose fault is it? It's yours, not theirs.
Right.
And what advice would you have for somebody who wants to get into leadership?
Yeah, it's very consistent for me. It's be a leader in your current role, right? So especially if you're at inside sales, it's a little bit different team relationship when you're inside versus field sales. But you're working together, which means they're hearing you on the phone. They're seeing what time you get in the office. They're seeing how you react to difficult news or changes in the organization. So if you want to get into leadership and you're an individual contributor right now, then start acting like the leader now, so that when that opportunity comes and you move into it, that player to coach transition, it feels obvious. It feels very natural. What you can't do is try to fit in and not take that leadership type role as an individual contributor and then go apply for the job and get it. Because then everybody who you might now be leading is going to say, hey, Brian, what happened to you? You're totally different now. And they're not going to take anything you say serious. So be the leader you want to be in your current role, so that when you do become the leader, you are not taking any sort of huge leap of faith here.
Cool. Hey, it's been a great conversation. Where can people go to follow you?
LinkedIn is the best place. Yeah, Kyle Peterson on LinkedIn. Answer every email that comes in. Would love to connect with anyone who has further questions. I've gained a lot from mentors in my career, and I would love to help others who are seeking advice and guidance.
Of
right.
what do we do? Right. And you're down here versus up here. You don't remember down here.
Yes, exactly. And it turns it into, a lot of these things you're selling, the teams you're working with are selling, and me too, they're complicated, considered sales where they're going to need executive buy-in, and those executives are going to need the story too, right? And so do you want do you want this person, there's going to be an internal pitch. Do you want them pitching, these features up, or do you want them pitching a big vision? And, wouldn't it be best to give them that rather than kind of relying on them to kind of come up with it on their own?
Right, because they're going to be what I call keyword focused, right? They're going to say firewall, database, bot, conversational analysis, and they're going to be like, we're covered. I think our phone system has that built in. And that's how they think.
Yeah. I love your laugh, by the way, Brian. It's great. It's
my only entertainment.
It just captures how absurd the typical approach can be, Yeah.
Right, because all I hear from salespeople, I got to work on my messaging. It's like, no, you got to come up with something that's bigger that, like in your case with your podcast, your mother can understand.
Right, exactly. Yeah. For those who don't know, my mother, my mother hated the name of my podcast. It's called The Bigger Narrative, and she thought that was a horrible name. And so I had her, she was visiting, so I just interviewed her about it. And then people liked that so much that I just had her come on. She introduces every episode now. All the guests, she introduces them.
Right, but it brings it down to the non-industry person, because she doesn't understand what drift does and stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly.
My mother doesn't know what a podcast is, so it's but that's what the C-suite is. The C-suite's like, they're looking at 15, 20 things a month, and the first thing they go is, don't I already own this? Isn't there a different way of solving this? Did you do your due diligence? Do you just want a new toy?
Yeah. So they're not interested in features and benefits. They're interested in high-level stakes. They're interested in winning and losing. And I think we always have to couch the narrative in these terms, the pitch in these terms, for that to resonate at that level.
Yeah. And do you see the narrative different than the category design?
That's a very interesting and politically sort of sensitive topic. Here's my take on it. I think every category really is a new game narrative. Yeah. So, if you take, Gong, which we're talking about, they call retail revenue intelligence, is really this story about the shift from opinions to reality. And so, that's their narrative and that's their category. And I think these two essentially are the same thing. I think when people just say category design, they're thinking, what are the 3 words we're going to use to name this thing, to label this thing? Yeah. And then they don't, but they're not thinking about the narrative behind it. The other thing is that how do you know you're successful at category design? Right. Really, you don't know until, I don't know, does Gartner name a quadrant after you, or G2 name a search term after you, after your category? And usually that takes many years. I've seen, companies like, Drift and Zwar, even the typical example, Salesforce. I mean, they created this incredible narrative early on about the new game being the cloud, old game being software. The CRM category was already very well established.
Right. 15 years old.
Salesforce automation, very well established. They didn't, unless you want to call like cloud CRM a new category, they didn't really do that. They just created a new narrative about how you win. And that I think is the more important thing to focus on.
And what was good about that narrative, and a lot of people still don't get this, because it wasn't the best CRM. It was the CRM that this VP of sales could buy without involving IT.
Yes. They had, I don't know if you knew about when at their launch party, this was like in 2000, you come into this party room, and they had actors playing salespeople who were being like tortured by being various things. I think some of them may have been like IT folks, prodding them and stuff. And so there was this whole thing about, and then they had Salesforce was like this heaven-free place that was the cloud. So it was all really about this new world, this new game that you were going to get to play and how great it was going to be. Exactly as you're saying.
Cool. Hey, so tell us, how do companies engage with you?
Most of them just contact me through my website, through the Drift chatbot on my website, andyraskin.com. A lot of people can connect with me through LinkedIn. That's where I write about all this stuff. That's really the best place to connect with me. I'm always putting sort of things I learn about in my engagements there. And then my own podcast, like I said, is the horribly named, according to my mother, The Bigger Narrative. And about crafting the strategic narrative, their challenges, things they've learned, stuff like that.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed that interview. Hey, I want to make sure you're checking out b2brevenue.com. That is where you can get a free copy of an ebook that I did. It's a real ebook. It's not a fluff book. It shows and talks about how companies make buying decisions and how you can influence that from both a marketing and a sales standpoint, how to find all the people that are in the decision path and what they need to see, know, and touch and feel before they make a product selection. If your team needs some coaching, some help, some training, some systems, some processes that do work today, because we know what doesn't work, or you know what doesn't work, I'll show you what does work and how to connect and get into pretty much any account. It includes deal coaching and content community, and I can customize it for your particular company. Just go to b2brevenue.com, look under training, schedule a call with me. We can talk it over, or just sign up. You can pay per month or all at once, whichever makes most sense for your budget. Also, I put out videos pretty much daily on LinkedIn and on YouTube. On LinkedIn, it's Brian G. Burns, and on YouTube, it's Brian Burns Sales. Just search for that if you like to consume some video content. And if you see me on LinkedIn, please put a comment and a share and a like on some of the videos. I really appreciate it. I've got a company page for each podcast. This one, the B2B Revenue Leadership Podcast, where I put both content and humor videos out daily. And tell a friend about the podcast. Really appreciate you listening. Check out the show notes for all the partners and the connections you can make there, the coupon codes for the products to evaluate them, see if they're a right match for you. And we'll see you next time.